When I asked if we were inviting the relatives to Mom's birthday like we always did, my dad didn't miss a beat. "You showing up would just be an embarrassment to the whole family," he said. Turns out, they were worried I'd somehow make them look bad in front of my sister Sandy's boyfriend. That was the last thing he said before I went silent. I didn't argue. Didn't ask why. Just opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and quietly started canceling every single automatic payment I'd been covering for the last couple of years. A month later, the reality must have hit them hard. That's when they finally realized just how much I'd been holding things together. But by then, it didn't matter anymore. I didn't take a single apology. Not one. I decided right then, I was done living for people who didn't care. I started doing things for me instead. So, here's my story. Maybe parts of it will sound familiar. Maybe you'll see a bit of yourself in it. My name's James. I'm 30 years old, and I live in a small town, about 40 minutes outside of Seattle. Each morning kicks off the same way. I make a cup of coffee, flip on the weather channel, and head into the office. It's just under 10 miles from where I live. I co-founded a small tech company that works in renewable energy. What I do isn't exactly easy to explain. Even my own family doesn't really get it. They think I spend my days with a wrench in one hand, fixing machines or tightening bolts. But honestly, that's never bothered me. I've never felt like I needed to break it down for anyone. Now and then, someone will ask about my folks or my sister, Sandy. I usually just smile and keep it short. It's been a while since we talked, I'll say. It's not that I'm trying to hide anything. I just don't see the point in going over it again. We haven't spoken in over 2 years. No phone calls. No texts. No birthdays. No holidays. Just silence. Like the thread tying us together snapped, and nobody even tried to tie it back. I used to think family was everything. I really did. But that changed 2 years ago, right around my mom's birthday. Actually, it was 3 weeks before her birthday. I had just booked a flight, gotten time off work, and was planning to fly home a couple of days early. Same plan as always, arrive early, help out, be part of the prep. Nothing fancy. Just our usual routine. I figured I'd give them a heads up, so I called Mom right away. But Dad answered instead, picked up after just 2 rings. "Hey, I'll be home a couple days early," I told him, all casual. "If there's anything you want me to bring or help out with, just let me know." He gave me one of those vague, responses, and then went quiet. I could tell something was off. His voice felt heavier than usual, like he was holding something back. Then he said, "James, maybe don't come home this year." At first, I thought he was just worried about me missing work or something. I tried to brush it off. "It's no big deal, Dad," I told him, holding my coffee. "I've already got everything sorted. It's all good." But the silence that followed? That one lasted longer. When he finally spoke again, his tone was different. It had gone colder, more matter-of-fact. "Sandy's bringing her boyfriend this year. He's a manager. Someone with status. Speaks well, looks the part. And your job, well, it's hard to explain to people. It's better if you stay away." I felt the heat rise up my neck, all the way to my face. My heart jumped, and I gripped my mug so tight I thought it might crack. "What the hell are you saying right now?" I snapped. Couldn't keep the calm in my voice anymore. "Are you seriously saying this to me?" He didn't deny it. Didn't walk it back. Didn't even try to soften the blow. He just said it, flat and sharp, "You showing up would embarrass the whole family. And if you insist on coming, don't call me your father." Then he hung up. I set the phone down slowly, my hand still shaking, damp with sweat. The apartment around me was dead quiet, no TV, no background noise, just stillness. It felt like someone had pulled the ground out from under me. His words kept playing on repeat in my head. Clear as day, like a recording on a loop, "You would embarrass the whole family. And if you insist on coming, don't call me your father. For a second, I actually wondered if I'd misheard him. But I hadn't. Every word hit with that same cold edge. No slip-up. No misunderstanding. No room left for hope. My jaw tightened, and my throat felt like it was closing up. I couldn't even swallow. And then, just like that, memories started crashing back in. I'd been paying all their bills. The electric. The water. The internet. Quietly, without saying a word. For over 2 years. No one ever said thank you. No one even mentioned it. And now I was the one they were ashamed of. Right then, I picked up my phone again. My hands were still a little unsteady, but my mind had gone ice cold. I opened my banking app and started scrolling through the transaction history. I needed to know, how much had I spent on them? Electric. Water. Internet. Month after month. Every single payment had gone through, never late, never missed. Each one pulled straight from my account like clockwork, month after month. Around $450, give or take. 2 years of that. No delays. No skipped payments. I scrolled all the way down to the bottom of the transaction history. Final total, $9,852.18. I stared at that number for a while. Not because it shocked me, I'd had a rough idea. But because, weirdly, I felt this stillness settle in my chest. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just, hollow. Almost 10 grand. And now, I'm the one they point to and call the shame of the family. As I looked through the list of charges, this quiet little question floated to the surface. One no one in my family had ever asked in 30 years, has Sandy ever done even half of this for them? It wasn't about jealousy. I didn't want credit or praise. I just needed to understand something. If I was the embarrassment, then what was that judgment based on? I had nearly $10,000 worth of proof sitting in front of me. All paid without being asked twice. No reminders. No conditions. And her? Had she ever gone out of her way? Ever asked them if they needed help? Or did she just breeze in with that picture-perfect smile, dressed to impress, holding hands with some successful guy, and that was enough? I wasn't trying to keep score. I was just finally noticing the math didn't add up. That's when the truth started sinking in. Fairness was never something this family operated on. I'd been pushed to the background for as long as I could remember. Even in family pictures, I always seemed to be the one slightly hidden behind someone else, or standing off to the side, not quite looking into the lens. No one ever asked me to step out of the frame. But somehow, I always ended up there. Sandy was always the center of everything. Every birthday, every graduation, every single breakup, she was the headline act. Everyone showed up for her. Everyone circled around her, arms out, ready to comfort and cheer her on. Me? I honestly can't recall the last time anyone asked how I was holding up. She's only 2 years older than me, but it always felt like the gap between us was something else entirely. She was the golden one. The one they pinned their hopes to. The one they bragged about when the relatives stopped by. And me? If I came up in conversation at all, it was just, oh, James. He's doing fine. Something with computers, I think. I used to think if I just worked hard, stayed out of trouble, kept things running smoothly in the background, maybe one day they'd finally notice me. Maybe they'd say, hey, we're proud of you too. But they never did. And I eventually learned something harsh: when people are used to not seeing you, they don't really notice when you're gone. I started covering their utility bills, electricity, water, internet, about 2 years ago. It began with a simple phone call from my mom. She sounded a little stressed that day. Told me how their bills had shot up, how retirement wasn't stretching the way it used to. Then, in that soft, hesitant voice of hers, she asked, if you could help us out a little, it'd really mean a lot. Of course I said yes. At the time, I figured it was temporary. A few months, tops. But those few months just never ended. Every month looked exactly like the one before it. No one ever said, "Hey, let's talk about stopping this soon." No plan to change things. Just silence, followed by the next bill. Sometimes I'd ask, "Is Sandy helping out at all?" She always dodged. "Just this month, okay? Your sister will pitch in next time." Or, "She's handling some of your dad's medical stuff. That's tough too, you know." I heard those lines so often they became a script. And every time, I let it go with a half smile and a quiet nod, because I already knew the truth. So I kept the payments going. Month after month. Nearly $450, like clockwork. Never complained. Never brought it up. And it wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I thought I was doing the right thing. I believed that if I just stayed steady, if I kept being reliable and quiet, they'd eventually see what I was doing. But now, after everything, I'm the one they look at and call a disappointment. After a while, once the shock and silence in my apartment settled in around me, I just sat there, still, almost frozen, my phone resting in my palm. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. What I felt was final. Like a line had been drawn, and I'd finally stepped back from it. That's enough. I opened my banking app again. Scrolled down to the section where the automatic payments were listed: electric, water, internet. One by one, I tapped into each of them and canceled the transfers. Just like that. No ceremony. No message. Not to punish anyone. Not out of spite. I did it to reclaim the one thing they hadn't stripped from me, my self-respect. About a week later, the first message came through. It was from Mom. Same gentle tone she always used. No mention of the phone call. No apology. Nothing. Just, "Hey, the internet bill is due. Can you take care of it?" I stared at the screen for a second, then set the phone down. Not out of revenge. Not to prove a point. But because, after all that had happened, the very first thing she thought to say, was still a request. Pay the internet bill. Not once did anyone ask, "Are you okay?" Not even a simple, "Can we talk?" So I kept my silence. And to me, that silence spoke louder than anything else ever could. 2 weeks later, my dad tried calling. The phone rang a few times and then stopped. I didn't answer. A few minutes after that, a voicemail came through. His tone hadn't changed. Still sharp. Still impatient. Same as it ever was. The power company called. "This month's bill hasn't been paid. What's going on?" No concern. No hint of what he'd said to me the day I told him I was coming home for Mom's birthday. No apology. No sign he'd even remembered. I listened to the message, turned off the screen, and laid the phone face down on the table. That was it. I stayed quiet. All the way through my mother's birthday. 3 weeks to the day since my father told me not to come home, her birthday arrived. The celebration went on like nothing had changed: roasted chicken, the usual cake from that bakery she loved, a small group of relatives gathered around the table. Everything looked just right, perfectly in place. Except me. At exactly 4:10 p.m., I was sitting in my living room, holding a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. That's when my phone started buzzing. It was my mom. Her name lit up on the screen. I looked at it for a few seconds, then quietly set the phone down. She hadn't hesitated. Neither did I. A few minutes later, my dad called. Then Sandy. 3 calls in under 10 minutes. I let them all go to voicemail. Didn't feel curious. Didn't even flinch. I stayed right where I was, leaning back in my chair, eyes fixed on the window. The glass was fogged up, the sky outside a heavy gray, not raining, but that bone-deep chill was settling in, the kind that tells you winter's waiting just outside the door. Not long after, the messages started rolling in. Mom was first. "James, the power's out. The house is dark. Please pay the bill." I read it once. No anger. No shock. Just that same quiet emptiness that had taken up space in my chest. The kind you feel when you've carried the weight of a family for years, and now you're standing alone with it. Then came Dad. No water. We can't cook. Handle it now. Sandy followed right after. Internet's down. Guests are arriving. Please fix this. Urgent. I glanced at the time, 5:15 p.m. I remembered exactly. 3 weeks earlier, almost to the minute, I'd cancelled all those payments. Right after Dad told me if I still planned on coming home, I should stop calling him my father. And now, in the middle of that birthday they told me not to attend, everything was starting to unravel. The power. The water. The internet. Each one shut off right when they needed it most. I didn't respond. Didn't call. Didn't send a single word. Not because I was being cruel. But because there was nothing left to explain. I just sat there, gently turning the cold coffee cup in my hands, eyes drifting toward the gray outside, like I was looking past it all, past the house, the party, the noise. In that moment, it became clear, they weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were calling because no one else was there to carry the weight. By 6 o'clock, the phone wouldn't stop buzzing. But it wasn't my parents anymore. Or Sandy. It was the relatives. The holiday crowd. The people who only show up a few times a year but always seem to have the loudest opinions. Their messages came one after another. Some called me selfish. One flat out said, "You embarrassed your mother in front of everyone." Another, more passive but just as cutting, chimed in with, "Your sister was right. People like you don't belong at happy occasions." I read every message. Didn't answer a single one. Not because silence meant guilt. But because I'd long since given up explaining myself to people who only ever sided with the loudest voices in the room. I was just about to put my phone down when it lit up again. This time, it was Aunt Julie. The one person in the family who'd never fully turned her back on me. She was calling through an old video app, one only she and I still bothered to use. Because we were the only ones who ever thought it mattered to look each other in the eye when it counted. I hesitated, then picked up on the second ring. Her face appeared first, a little blurry in the yellow kitchen light behind her. A kitchen I used to know like the back of my hand. Every chipped tile. Every drawer that stuck. But tonight, it felt different. Behind her, I could hear the clinking of silverware, awkward laughs, some scattered conversation. It was all still going, the party marching on without me. She looked straight into the screen, her eyes soft and searching. "You're not going to pay it, are you, James?" Her voice wasn't harsh. It didn't accuse. It was gentle. Curious. I met her gaze, and when I finally spoke, my words came slow, like I was pulling something out that had been buried too long. "You know, Auntie, it was Dad. He told me not to come." I swallowed, trying to keep my voice even. "He said if I showed up anyway. I shouldn't call him my father." She didn't say anything. Just went quiet. Her eyes shifted slightly, like she was scanning the room behind her, maybe for him, maybe for Sandy. Maybe just trying to make sense of it all. And that's when everything on the call fell apart. I heard my mother's voice rise above the background noise, sharp and clear now. "Tell him I'm ashamed of him, on today of all days." Then my dad jumped in, louder, more agitated. "This isn't some big deal. It's just paying a few bills. What kind of man gets this petty over money?" Another voice chimed in, pretty sure it was my uncle. Poor Sandy, having to deal with a brother like that. I could hear footsteps getting closer to the phone. Then Sandy came into view, standing behind Aunt Julie. Arms crossed tight, her mouth twisted in irritation. "He actually answered," she said, eyes cutting into the screen. "Mom's been crying all day. And he just sits there. Doesn't even care. No shame at all." I didn't say a thing. I just watched in silence, like that stillness was the last bit of armor I had left. And just as I moved to end the call, another figure slipped into the frame from the side. A young guy, hair neatly combed, wearing a dark suit. His eyes landed on me with a flicker of surprise, like he was trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Then, almost unsure, he gave a small, nervous smile. "Hey, boss," he said, his voice rough, uncertain, like he wasn't sure if those two words even belonged in that moment. I froze. My eyes locked on the screen, and I instinctively tightened my grip on the phone. I hadn't seen this coming. Not here. Not on the night they all decided I was too much of a disgrace to be part of the family celebration. But then it clicked. That face. The voice. His manner. Of course. He was one of our new hires, transferred recently from our southern branch. We'd exchanged a few emails. He'd sent me 2 reports. Solid work. Professional. But it had never crossed my mind, he was Sandy's boyfriend. The one they were all trying so hard to impress. The room behind Aunt Julie shifted, like everyone had just stopped mid-breath. She glanced over her shoulder, and suddenly the kitchen was full of this strange, nervous energy. Then, a quiet voice, barely a whisper, "Wait, what did he just call James?" Another voice, shaky and unsure, followed. "Boss? Does that mean James is her boyfriend's boss?" The whispers started to rise, layered on top of each other, questions spinning with no answers. And me? I didn't flinch. Didn't nod. Didn't deny it. I just kept watching. Then, the young man straightened his back. He turned slightly, facing the people behind the camera, and spoke loud and clear. "In case anyone didn't know," he said, "I work at Cantal Plus. Mr. James is one of the company's co-founders." The words landed like a strike, sharp, undeniable. They sliced through the clutter of plates and chatter and whatever was left of the birthday party mood. And then, silence. Not awkward. Not angry. Just stunned. I still didn't speak. Just pressed my lips together and gave a slight nod, a quiet acknowledgement. He turned back to face me, his eyes a little wider now. And that's when I said it. Calm. Even. Like the words had been sitting inside me, waiting for this moment. "Hope your big introduction goes well." Then I ended the call. That night, I slept better than I had in years. No tossing. No replaying conversations in my head. No waking up in the dark with questions I'd already answered 100 times. For the first time in a long while, I felt light. Not because I'd proven anything, but because they finally knew. They finally saw me. The next morning, before the light had even filled the room, I reached over and grabbed my phone. Just like I always did. There were a few calendar alerts. A couple emails from accounting. And then, one message stood out. The sender's name was unfamiliar. Watson William. I opened it. The first line hit me right away, "I'm sorry. I didn't know you were Sandy's brother." He went on to say he'd always respected me at the company. My brow lifted a little as I sank into the pillow and kept reading. Watson said he'd been genuinely shocked to learn about the family connection, and he didn't dodge around it. No fluff. No excuse. "I didn't expect her to be like that," he wrote. "I'll be ending the relationship. Thank you for not putting me on the spot in front of everyone." I rested the phone against my chest for a few seconds and closed my eyes. It took me a little while before I opened the inbox and started typing a response. Nothing fancy. No emotion. Just clear and honest. "Watson, that's your decision. I don't expect anyone to act a certain way just to stay on my good side. Whatever you choose, make sure it's the right call for you. And for the record, I don't mix family with work." I hit send. No second thoughts. No weight hanging on it. For me, that was enough. Some things, once they're made clear, don't need to be said again. Around 10 that morning, just as I was wrapping up a leadership meeting and gathering my notes, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Sandy. Her name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a few seconds, then declined the call. No anger. No drama. I just didn't have it in me to entertain another apology that only showed up after the damage was already done. 5 minutes later, a text came through. I'm sorry. I didn't think Watson would react like that. You're his boss. If you said something, he'd listen. Please, talk to him. Ask him to come back. After reading it, I stood up and walked to the hallway window. I leaned against the glass, looking out, but not really seeing anything. I read the message again. Then one more time, just to be sure. After that, I started typing my reply. It wasn't long, but it wasn't abrupt either. Just enough to make sure she understood. Watson didn't leave because I told him to. He left because of the way you treat people. The way you look down on what you don't understand. And how you always assume that, if your voice is soft enough, you can steer anyone in any direction. I hit send. Slipped the phone back into my pocket and returned to my desk, ready to move on. But less than a minute later, another message came in. I know. I messed up. This time, I really mean it. I'll change. Please. Just believe me, this once. I didn't reply. I read it once, sat with it for a few seconds. But there was nothing left in me that stirred. Not because I didn't care. But because, at last, I understood something clearly. Sometimes the real distance between two people isn't in the words they say, it's in when those words finally come. I quietly deleted the message. Left no trace behind. And then, I turned back to the life that was still actually happening. A week later, Friday afternoon, I had just stepped inside from the garage when I stopped cold on the porch. There they were. My parents. Standing at my front door, each holding a small suitcase. They looked tired, worn down from a long flight. I didn't ask why they came. They hadn't flown all this way just to say hi. Whatever it wasn't casual. I opened the door and let them in. No tension. No ceremony. Just a simple, quiet decision. I wasn't about to have that conversation out on the porch, with the wind starting to stir and the cold settling in. We sat in the living room. The tea on the table still steaming gently between us. My father spoke first. His voice was calm, more measured than usual, as he apologized. Then my mother added to it, saying they'd done some thinking. Maybe they'd gone too far. Maybe things never should have reached this point. I didn't interrupt. I just listened, wondering whether this apology was truly a closing chapter, or just the start of another negotiation. And right on cue, my father's tone shifted. We're family, James. Family supports each other. We raised you. Got you through school. Everything you have now, part of that came from us. Right? I looked at him. Didn't say a word. Just sat up a little straighter. Then my mom spoke, gently. Her voice soft, like what she was saying should sound completely reasonable. If you could, maybe, send us around $3,000 a month. Just a little support. It's not a big ask for someone in your position. I looked at the two people sitting in my home. The same two who once told me not to show up for my own mother's birthday. The same ones who made it clear I was an embarrassment. And now, here they were, turning their apology into a transaction. Putting a price tag on reconciliation. A concrete number. $3,000 a month. Because I was their son. And to them, my success wasn't something I'd earned, it was a bill I now owed. I let out a short, quiet laugh. Not mean-spirited. Not sarcastic. Just that breathy chuckle you make when someone tells you a story that doesn't make any sense at all. They looked at me, waiting, probably expecting me to nod, to agree. But I wasn't angry. I'd come too far to be rattled by this kind of thing. I leaned back in my chair, kept my voice even. What about Sandy? I asked. How much is she contributing each month? The room went still. The air felt heavier, like it didn't want to move. My father glanced at my mother, passing the response her way. She answered slowly, her voice dropping. Well, her job situation isn't exactly stable. And the breakup with Watson, it's been hard on her. I nodded slightly. No surprise there. Same explanations, just dressed in new clothes. More sympathetic sounding. But they were still just deflections. I met their eyes and replied. If Sandy agrees to give you $3,000 a month, I'll match it. No more. No less. They didn't answer. They just stared, like they weren't sure if I was serious. I kept going, voice calm. Or, if you want me to cover the full amount, then I'll need it in writing. A legal agreement. Something official that says, when you both pass, the house comes to me. Fully. Then I stopped. No pressure. No raised voice. No follow-up explanation. Just left the words sitting there between us, waiting. Because for the first time, I was the one setting the terms. For something they had always assumed was just my obligation. As soon as I finished, the silence thickened. And then, without warning, my father stood up. He slammed his hand down on the table. The teacup tipped and spilled, tea running over the edge and onto the floor. His voice exploded through the room, booming, full of rage, his chest heaving with every breath. You're setting conditions for us. Your parents. We raised you for over 20 years, and now you're trying to nickel and dime us like this? What kind of life are you even living? He was shouting so loud, I wouldn't have been surprised if the neighbors paused mid-dinner to listen. But I didn't move. Didn't react. I just sat there, hands resting on the arms of my chair, eyes steady on his. Not cold. But not soft anymore either. I waited for the storm to pass. Then, slowly, I stood up. And when I spoke, my voice was steady, low and quiet, but sharp enough to slice through the noise he'd just hurled my way. I think you both should leave my house. It wasn't a threat. Wasn't even anger. Just a calm request from someone who had finally reached the last edge of what respect could hold. They didn't argue. No one said anything. Only the sound of suitcases dragging across the hardwood floor, and the soft click of the door closing behind them. Quieter than everything they'd just left behind inside me. It's been 2 years since that moment. Right here, in my own home. The last time I saw them. I never blocked their numbers. Never changed my email. Never wrote them off completely. I just stopped reaching out, and waited. Waited to see if, when I was no longer defined by duty or obligation, they'd still see me as part of the family. They didn't. 2 years. Not a single phone call. Not even a quick message to ask how I've been. No mention of birthdays. No checking in on my health. Not even a simple, hey, are you doing okay? I used to believe they'd come around. That maybe, with time, they'd change. But what I've come to learn is, not everyone changes. Especially not the people who've spent their whole lives convinced they were never wrong. Life goes on. I'm still here. Still working. Still building. But one thing has changed. I stopped letting myself be an emotional ATM, constantly giving, constantly drained, all in the name of being the good son. And if there's one truth I've taken from everything that's happened, it's this. Family isn't a place where people get to demand your kindness and call it love. Real family. It's where you're seen. Not just for what you give, but for who you are. It's where your worth isn't tied to your wallet, your usefulness, or how much you can endure before breaking. It's not a backup plan. Not a last resort. And definitely not a guilt trip wrapped in nostalgia. Before I close this chapter, I want to ask you something. Was I wrong? Wrong for walking away. Wrong for saying no to sending my parents $3,000 a month, especially now, when they're older, even though they once raised me. I used to believe love and loyalty could patch up anything. But after being treated like a stranger in my own home, more times than I can count, I finally chose to step outside the cycle.